Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. We are still in quarantine, and so we are still social distancing, but we are live, and I am so honored to have Donna Givens, President and CEO of Eastside Community Action Network, and we're going to talk about George Floyd this evening. Welcome, Donna. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, Donna, we all are grieving, frustrated, angry, sad, confused, wondering how we got here. What are your thoughts on what happened with George Floyd and the murder and his murder?
He was caught. The murderer was caught. Somebody videotaped something that happened, and something that has been happening for centuries was caught on tape. And it was not the normal type of police killing, which is a bullet going quickly, where an officer can say they panicked. We watched him die in slow motion. It was 8 minutes that this man's knee was on somebody's neck. And he almost looked to be smiling and uninterested as we heard this man pray for his life. Probably the most riveting part was when he asked for his mother. And so this provided video evidence to something that we know has happened over the years, and officers have been able to find ways to deny it. And this time, because they couldn't, in embarrassment, police chiefs across America and police officers have said that, oh, this is not something that we agree with.
So let me ask you a question, because you pointed to the video and how police officers have traditionally been able to deny it, say that it didn't happen, ascribe some sort of blame to the person who was murdered. We saw Rodney King on video over 30 years ago, I believe it was. We've seen countless other people on video. We saw Eric Garner. Yes, he was selling loosies outside of a store, but we saw the police officer actually choke him out. We've seen it time and time again in Chicago. We've seen police officers pull over college students trying to get into their vehicle, or saying that the vehicle didn't belong to them, and later to find out that it did belong to him. Is there something that you saw in this video leading you to believe that there will be a different outcome than what we've normally or historically have seen?
I can't speak to the outcome, because we know that police have been given, permission in many ways to kill Black men and women at will, with very little recourse. Juries do not find them guilty. My good friend Keith Ellison, who is the Minnesota Attorney General, is an outstanding attorney, a brilliant mind, and yet he is not confident that with the best of his office that he will be able to have these police officers convicted, because the benefit of doubt is so great. And I think the benefit of the doubt starts with the dehumanization of Black men, Black people, this perception that Black people are a threat, very much like a pit bull dog, and we must do everything we can to contain that threat. What this video did, though, was really up close. You saw a really graphic up close image of a man with his knee on somebody's neck while 3 other officers were standing around doing nothing. Crowds of people witnessed what was happening. You heard him beg for his life. He was handcuffed and clearly not in a position to offer any type of effective resistance. So he said, "My hurt." He described the pain. And this was more graphic even than the Eric Garner killing in New York, in my opinion. Although I have to be honest with you, I'm saying I saw photos. I don't watch snuff films. I don't watch those videos anymore. I trust other people to watch them, but for my mental health, I cannot watch another Black man die. But I think that the difference is those who watched it found that the 8 minutes of leading up to this were just excruciating in detail. And I think it's going to be harder to justify even using the pit bull theory that Black men are inherently dangerous. That is really hard in this instance.
And I absolutely agree with you. It is very difficult to watch video. I watched the Ahmaud Arbery video and immediately burst into tears. It was the same thing watching George Floyd's video. And I've only been able to watch it once. And once I saw it, I was like, I don't need to see anymore. It was devastating. But I want to keep us on the same vein, but I want to talk about the activity that we see across our nation and across the world. Are you surprised by the outrage that you see, or is this something in community action that you were expecting, or it has been building?
I don't think anybody expected this. I know that it's been building. I know that over the past 4 years, I've talked to people who never even wanted to talk about race. A lot of the people who used to say, I don't see race. All people are the same. If you were green, I would not care. As if there are green people are now recognizing that there is such a thing as white privilege. You don't have to prove it to white people as often anymore. They understand that there is something called white supremacy. Donald Trump and his cohort have helped expose the sort of underground white supremacy beliefs and behaviors to the world. And they're no longer underground. People are openly bragging about those beliefs. And so you have a greater level of social consciousness. It's not lost on me that all of this happens during a pandemic, when Black people are dying at a very heightened rate, where people have been sheltering in place all over the nation, where about 40% or more of Americans are now filed for unemployment, where people aren't sure if they're going to be able to maintain their homes. And so the combination of growing awareness and really dissatisfaction with the way that America is conducting its life, the perception that many people feel that a lot of these deaths were avoidable, and the irresponsible government led to the loss of 100,000 lives, or, maybe not 100,000, maybe just 90,000 lives, or 70, whatever that number is. We know there were excess deaths because of irresponsible presidential leadership, and I think that's even a nice way of putting it. But anyway, you have all of these things in place to produce an outburst of anger. Again, there's no way around looking at that video to say that that was anything but an execution. This man had not been convicted of a crime. Had he been convicted, it would have been a petty crime. $20 bill, any one of us could have passed a $20 counterfeit bill. The fact that somebody was called because somebody may have accidentally or intentionally passed a $20 bill is really questionable. So I think you have to look at all of those factors together. And I think that it's coming on the heels of, I don't remember the case Arbery in Georgia. Yes. It's coming on the heels of Karen, who was in New York calling the police on a man who was bird watching. And again, heightened awareness has produced in many people a lot of outrage. And I was really surprised by the number of white people who were actually outraged, and I would say ashamed and embarrassed that these things were happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So really quickly, because I do want to talk about what happened in New York. Why do you think, in terms of community, because I know you work in community engagement and activism, what do you think is the uptick in white people, the so-called Karen syndrome, where we see this again, which for me evokes the memory of Emmett Till?
Right, because we had it during Emmett Till. Is it an uptick, or is there a heightened awareness? Are we finally calling people out for doing what they've been doing for a long time? I remember one time I was vice president for programs at Big Brothers Big Sisters of Metropolitan Detroit, and one of my staff lived in Macomb County, and I was going to a garage sale that she invited me to support her. And when I got to her house, I was there. It was right a few minutes before she actually opened her doors for the garage sale. And the police started patrolling the neighborhood and looking at me, trying to see if I was being suspicious. And every Black person in America, just about all of us have a story like that. So it's not like police have just started being called on us, or people have just started reporting us. I think that the interesting phenomenon, though, is that when we think of racism, a lot of times we look at white men and we look at white women. A lot of times they are portrayed as our allies. And I think that just as in the days of Emmett Till, racism does not have a gender. It does not have a sexual orientation. Racism is about an attitude about white superiority and a desire to dominate and control people who are not like them. This belief that the earth really belongs to a certain type of people. How else can you explain a group of people who can, on the one hand, say they have a right to life, and on the other hand, contribute to death, disease, and harm to people who try to cross these borders, fleeing terror, fleeing poverty, fleeing, governments that are oppressive. If life matters, what about their lives? I think that you can only rationalize that if you have the dehumanization of people who are not white, which is part of what white supremacy is.
Excellent point. Excellent point. I want to take a break. We're going to be right back. You're watching the Kim B. Davis Show. You are watching the Kim B. Davis Show, and we are live with Donna Givens, President and CEO of the Eastside Action Community Network. Donna, we were just talking about white supremacy and racism, and we were talking about the Karen syndrome. And it's interesting because people who think that they're tolerant, or people who say, I have Black friends, I don't understand that. You were discussing a little bit about how that has always been, and we're just seeing it now because people are reporting it more. Can you go into a little bit more about that?
Yes, I mean, even the term tolerant is offensive. I tolerate people who are not like me, right? Or the term racial sensitivity. I'm sensitive to the people who are like me. Those are very different from I respect and honor people who aren't like me. And without respect and honor, it's easy for people to mistreat people who aren't like them, right? And so I think that racism and white supremacy is lacking respect and honor for cultures and races who are not like the invented race of whiteness, because all races are invented by white people in order to categorize people. I think the Karens of this world, I went to a high school that was a majority white high school in Farmington Hills, and Mercy High School. And when I went there, I had classmates who I would talk to every day of the week in school. And on Saturdays and Sundays, I might see them at the movies, or I worked at a popular Baskin Robbins and I would see them there. And they never remembered my name. They pretended like they had never seen me before, like they didn't know me. I was disowned by my classmates every single weekend. So, as far as I'm concerned, most of the student body in my high school was a bunch of Karens. And after a while, I stopped even remembering their names, because if you can't remember me on Saturday, I don't know who you are Monday through Friday. Some of them I'm Facebook friends with now, and I newly introduced them. Really, we went to high school together, because I stopped, that was my defense mechanism as a young person. But I saw it when I was young. I saw it when I went to the University of Michigan, and I had a white classmate who complained to the professor that I tried to be too smart. And she hated me because I tried to be too smart. And she expected him to agree with her. And he laughed at her and said, how do you try to be smart? Either you are or you aren't. And she is. And then she was really furious. So I've experienced Karens growing up, and I'm not surprised to see them called out right now. And if we're going to really look at, Miss America or Mrs. America is now on Hulu. And it depicts how in the feminist movement, Black women were marginalized by white women then. And a lot of times Black men have also been demonized. There is this perception of Black masculinity being, really uncontrolled, that Black men have an uncontrolled desire to rape white women and to harm white women that helps feed that fiction. And I think, on the flip side of it, I don't want to get too much of this, but there have been studies shown that a lot of white women have fantasies about being raped by Black men. And so that whole pairing When you see a white woman and a black man, it's not surprising to me that you have a woman who can fantasize about this black man having done something to her when he didn't, and being able to make that up because maybe that's played out in her mind and fantasies over the years.
And unfortunately, we have seen the negative effects of that. There was a football player in high school who was accused of rape and was sent to jail and was later found that the girl lied about it, and he lost his scholarships and lost a great deal of his youth. I know that people are angry. I know that people are fighting. I want to talk a little bit about the complicated history between law enforcement and communities of color. Can you talk specifically about the history in Detroit so that people understand when people react the way that they do? Because I keep telling people this could happen in Detroit. It may not have happened yet with any particular police officer, but we've had police officers. There was one, I think, last year who put out a Twitter post or Instagram post that he was going out to guard the zoo. And he was talking about the monkeys and how he hated having to police them, meaning Black people. And he took his Twitter feed down and, of course, said some things that, he was joking or he didn't mean it. And I believe he was reprimanded for it. But I'm quite sure that there are other police officers who feel like that.
I mean, Malice Green was killed in Detroit, beat to death in Detroit. And Nevers and Budson were sent to prison, at least for a little while. And that's how Kim Worthy came to prominence, because she was the prosecutor on that case. So I think that Detroit police officers in U.S. cities for years have existed for a couple of things. And one of them is to control the behavior of some citizens and to keep them in their place, and to act on behalf of white citizens to protect them from Black people. And the other one is to investigate crimes and to try to, eliminate crimes. So within the Black community, Black men have always felt, at least as far as I know, always felt like they are under surveillance by police officers, have always felt as though their lives are at risk. If you remember in 1967, the rebellion in Detroit was rooted in racism and racist policing and police killings of Black men and police units that were set up to entrap and then kill Black men, which is also how Coleman Young rose to prominence and became mayor of the city of Detroit. I think that right now we know that police officers are infiltrated by Nazis and white supremacists. The FBI noted that years ago. And so I think that we sort of hear that and then move on without understanding how the culture of policing impacts what happens in our community. You can change a police chief much more easily than you can change police culture. People talk about police unions. Well, they're unlike any other union I've seen. The UAW, the AFL-CIO, AFSCME, all of these unions sometimes work together to protect workers' rights. The police union has one purpose, and that is to maintain almost an omerta-like silence in the police and to control the behavior of police officers. And I believe to punish and hold police officers accountable who sometimes may even want to violate that code. So I think that the police union is really more like organized crime than it is like a actual union, and it exists to hide and to protect misconduct while at the same time perpetuating some of the misbehavior that you see across police forces in this nation.
You're absolutely right. I do remember the Malice Green trial very well. What would you suggest people do with their anger? Because I know people have asked me, specifically, what should they do? And I told them, I said, we're going to do this show and we're going to have someone who's an expert who can come on and tell you how to proactively work out your frustration and anger and be a part of this fight.
I'm not sure if I'm the best representative for that, because my thing is I can't tell anybody how to deal with their anger. I think there are consequences to anger, but I can't tell anybody how to act out their anger. I have the privilege of being employed, making a pretty good living, living in a nice place, and not being subjected to continual police surveillance and abuse, okay? But there are some people who live in a place in society where they just don't feel like they're respected by anybody. And when they act angry, we tell them to curtail their anger and hold it in and use the political process. The political process does not work for poor people. It doesn't matter who's president, doesn't matter who's governor, doesn't matter who's mayor. Those political people do not believe that they are accountable to or serving the needs of poor people. These past couple of years, I've referred to the treatment of certain people as subjects and certain people as citizens. Black people in communities like ours are treated more like subjects than like citizens. They have all of the responsibilities as citizens and fewer of the privileges. When government in Detroit makes rules, are they making rules to address the priorities and needs of Black people or white business owners and white people they're trying to attract into the city? When police function in Detroit, are they functioning the same with all communities? I think not. When they are in the downtown, midtown areas where there are a concentration of wealthier, whiter, and customer-style people, they exist to protect people from harm. When they come into the Black community, you can call a police officer and wait 2 days before you get a response to a crime committed against you. But the surveillance behavior of police inside of communities is really significant. So I think that people have got to be heard. I think they've got to be respected. And I think they have the right to stand up and protest, as much of a right to protest, speak out, scream out, put up signs, and refuse to disperse upon police approval, police commands, as Nazis do when they walk on the Capitol with guns. It's hard to preach an ethic of nonviolence when police are using tear gas and rubber bullets and beating people and jailing people. And we know they're jailing people who are innocent because they're jailing journalists. And you certainly know journalists aren't there. We saw a CNN reporter being jailed in full view of the television. And there are certain videos out there that just show police officers driving cars into crowds. I mean, the kinds of behavior, breaking up water bottles and destroying medics' tents when people are coming together. So my preaching is to police that when you are called out for your abuse and violence, you certainly don't make matters worse when you behave in a violent manner to put down protest. They're the ones being paid. If you are a paid police officer and you have not been trained to de-escalate violent situations, if you have not been trained in conflict resolution, nobody's there to talk about. Remember, we could do it like a hostage situation, right? And we can have somebody in there negotiating and having a conversation, but instead the only thing they think to do is disperse the crowd and control and muffle the speech. And the final thing I want to say about that is I've been very, very, very disheartened by what I see in the city of Detroit, because what I've seen is our police chief manipulate citizens of the city of Detroit and play on longstanding and realistic and well-deserving resentment and anger towards suburban people and white people to try to suggest that white people have no right to come into Detroit and protest in sympathy with Black people, that they want to protest, they should protest in their own communities. And he seems really intent on pushing this Detroit versus everybody narrative. That's cool. So when he puts out data saying this is how many people have been arrested, this is where they live, I wish he would show data on where his police officers live. How many of them live in Detroit? Okay. Not too long ago, 2 terms ago, Mike Duggan was living in Livonia. Livonia has problems. He moved to Detroit for the purpose of running for mayor. If he has an issue with people coming into Detroit to try to solve problems and speak up for other people, why didn't he stay in Livonia? I have never been one to call him Livonia Mike, although other people have, but I'm going to tell you, it pisses me off when I see governmental officials on our payroll demand that people who come here to support us don't belong here, while at the same time escorting Nazis through our city a year ago and saying they have the right to free assembly and free speech. It's got to be one or the other, because we know they don't belong here. They don't belong here because we're here. They don't belong here and they don't live here. I'm sure 100% of them did not live here, and I didn't see where they came from. And on the other hand, they weren't arrested. On the east side of Detroit yesterday, 120 people, something like that, were arrested for walking down the street in peaceful protest at 8:30. Their hands were zip tied, they were pepper sprayed and taken to the police headquarters. One of them was kept in jail overnight. And he was kept in jail overnight, and they were thinking of trying to figure out how to get charges that he was inciting a riot. And this is a Detroit resident, Tristan Taylor, who is a longstanding community activist who has the right to free speech. I don't always like what he has to say, but he has the right to say it. He's a Detroiter, and he has as many rights as a Nazi, and yet he's treated worse than a Nazi. And the Nazis came through here and disrespected everybody in the city of Detroit. So that's my thought around policing and how people need to deal with their violence. It is a police responsibility to help manage violence, to help manage crowd control. And in our modern day era, our police are so militarized, they behave more like an occupying army than a police force with any thought to protect the well-being of people here. And it just really makes me angry.
I agree with you on that, because I'll give you another contrasting image. Remember a few weeks ago when we looked at the Capitol in Lansing? That's and right. We saw armed protesters in the actual legislative hall. And I have friends who are legislators, and they were going to work with body armor on. Sure. Some had armed guards with them. It was outrageous. Yes, and you're right. The Nazi Party came through here last summer, like in the middle of River Days or something, where everybody was downtown. Mm-hmm. I was very disappointed with how that went down. It's frustrating because we see these other groups protest and can be in your face with guns and all types of violent gear. But when we see our people or people that are coming to support us, as you say, Donna, they are turned away. They are maligned, criticized, and told to go home. And because our time is going really quickly, what one thing would you tell young people about using their voice?
I think that before you use your voice, you need to have an understanding of what's happening. And so we need to do a better job educating young people about the world around them and doing some root cause analysis so that young people can speak with authority. I mean, we have to listen to young people too. And a lot of times they know more than we do. So I'm not suggesting that young people don't have knowledge that we don't. And I think a lot of people our age have a hard time letting go of the reins of power and letting young people lead. Martin Luther King was 26 years old when he arranged his first boycott, and he did a great job. Young people have the voice and the intelligence that older people have. We have more wisdom and experience, but a lot of times we have more trepidation. We are not as courageous as young people. But I think that, learning more, being able to work in coalition with other people is helpful. I think that organizing and taking these lessons and figuring out some specific things that they want to see happen as a result of this activism is important. You don't want a protest going to waste. What do you want? And don't just say things like abolish police. Be specific. Be specific about how we get from where we are to where we want to be, so that the more we are able to leverage our anger right now and some collective sympathy or concern for what's happening, the better we're going to be able to get results. I think that the civil rights movements in the 1960s, and I think that we need to stop referring to the 1960s as Martin Luther King. You had the Black Panthers, you had the Nation of Islam, and you had other groups who were out there doing things in the community and trying to fight for justice. And everybody didn't use the same tactics. But I'm saying that to say we did have a clear objective. And the clear objective there was desegregation. It was Black power. It was allowing people to buy homes. Whatever the targets are, let's figure out what we want. Put together an agenda, demand that in this protest, translate that into political demands we have on candidates, and start holding people accountable.
Thank you, Donna, for coming on, giving us your feedback, your thoughts. Tell us how we can reach you and how we can learn more about your great organization.
Eastside Community Network is celebrating our 36th year. And right now we are sheltering in place, but we are still out there and available. If you go to our website, ecn-detroit.org, you can learn more about us. And there are 3 hotline numbers you can use to contact us. I don't have those hotline numbers handy, but we have one for businesses. If you're a small business and you're trying to survive, we have resources. If you're on Mack Avenue, we have resources to invest in stabilizing your business. We're going to be training people in converting to an e-economy. And we are also passing out personal protective equipment for business owners on behalf of DT in the city of Detroit. So if you're a business owner, call us. If you are a resident in the city of Detroit, a lot of what we do is organize residents, get your voices involved in how the east side of Detroit is moving forward. We do have resident support and supplies available, whether that's food or PPE or anything else that you're looking for. If you need your water reconnected, if you need DTE connected, if you need any type of resource, call us and we will work with you to try to connect you to the right resources and walk with you to get it done. If you are at risk of tax foreclosure, even though there is a moratorium, come see us. If you are at risk of tax foreclosure, you can probably get your tax bill reduced by a PAYS program, which is recent legislation to reduce tax bill significantly. So contact us. And then we're also helping people file for income tax and trying to make sure that we maximize the returns that people receive. And we're doing that in partnership with the Accounting Aid Society. So come to us and we're always happy to help you. And finally, if you're a young person, we have resources for young people. We have after-school programs. We are hiring 35 young people this summer. I don't know how many slots are left. We're going to be working virtually and training young people in journalism as well as photography, graphic design, and community development. And they'll be working on projects this summer. We have after the cap and gown programs to connect recent graduates to the workforce and to college and careers. And we're helping high school students who are currently enrolled get into college. So get into college and also achieve scholarships. We've done a great job connecting our young people to scholarships and helping with completion. Please join us, and we have 3 hotlines.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for watching the Kim B. Davis Show. Remember, stay home, stay safe. Your voice is your most powerful weapon. Use it. I hope to see you on our next episode of the Kim B. Davis Show. And remember, be magnificent.